Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday's Topics on I Love to Watch You Play. We haven't done one in a while, and what a better time to do one now because I have Dr. Amy Saltzman, and she is the director of A Still Quiet Place and the author of this book, A Still Quiet Place for Athletes, which is one of my favorite books. And my daughter and I have read every chapter together and done the exercises. And we're so honored to have you today, Dr. Saltzman. Thank you for being on.
Thank you so much for having me.
But before we get going, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into mindfulness.
Well, I think we'll start with that. I'm a longtime athlete. So I was a gymnast as a kid and competed through my sophomore year in college at Stanford. And then had a series of injuries and chose to start racing my bike. So I raced my bike through my second year in medical school. And now I'm a recreational athlete. I have a holistic medicine practice. I share mindfulness with children, teens, parents, healthcare professionals, athletes, coaches. And I am also a parent of one professional level athlete and one performing artist.
Wow, that is quite a resume leading up to this conversation. It's so you started with mindfulness and then it was a natural entree into the athlete side of it?
Well, I actually kind of think it's almost the other way around. So I think gymnastics was my first mindfulness practice. I just didn't have that word or know that at the time, but in gymnastics, perhaps more than most sports, you need to be mindful or you're going to be on your behind on the mat. So I think my first introduction to mindfulness really was my gymnastics, and then it kind of came full circle after teaching mindfulness to patients with chronic pain and chronic illness and parents, and then my own children, and then children more broadly, and then kind of coming back to my first love and bringing my loves of sports and mindfulness together.
Okay, terrific. Well, you know, as I mentioned earlier on, the book, and I've been telling you this, it's full of so much good information. This was a really challenging interview for me to prepare for because I wanted to talk about everything. So we'll have to have you back to talk about other things. But today we're going to focus on two things. First is for parents. Second is more for the athlete. And I think most of the people on our website or watching this right now can probably relate to this. And it's parents feeling overly attached to the performance or outcomes of what's happening on the field. And a lot of times they probably don't even realize that. I say that, they might not know what they're feeling is actually that. But I'd like to, first of all, if you could explain what that feels like and what that is, and then we can get into how parents can find some tips from you to help with that.
Yeah, I can definitely explain. And I think before we do that, it might be helpful to start with just a simple definition of mindfulness and then to break it down. So my definition of mindfulness is paying attention here and now with kindness and curiosity so that we can choose our behavior. So I'm going to take those three pieces and break them down. So paying attention here and now means doing our best to be aware of what's happening in the moment, not obsessing about the past or worrying or fantasizing about the future. With kindness and curiosity means being gentle and curious about what our experience actually is, because otherwise we either as parents or as athletes can just tend to beat ourselves up, and that's not particularly helpful. And then the crucial part, the reason we pay attention with kindness and curiosity is so that we can choose our behavior. So as a parent, and I've certainly done it myself, when I'm mindful and become aware that I'm overly attached to my child's performance, whether it's athletic performance or academic performance, what I notice for myself is that there can tend to be a lot of thinking, and there's kind of a tension, like a nervous tension in my body, and it almost has a leaning forward kind of feeling, like on the edge of my seat. And those,
when you're leading the ball or the with your body, I think.
Yeah. And like, I think it's funny. I'm reading Ali Raceman's autobiography right now, and I don't know if you've seen that video, but in the Olympics, you watch her parents watching her, and they're like, each move, they're like this. And it's sweet and it's love. And at the same time, there is something about it that tells us, I mean, there can be just the pure parental joy of it. And we want to be careful of really being there for our kids kind of without an agenda. And that's definitely easier said than done. And the first thing for us to do is to actually acknowledge when we do have an agenda and take responsibility for it. And just say, like, you know, I think I'm being overly attached and I can't actually hear what you're saying about your difficulty with your practice or your difficulty with your teammate or your difficulty with your coach, or just that, like, your body's toast and you need a rest. Like, I'm too invested.
Mm-hmm. But you talk about in the book something called befriending feelings. Is this to help with this, or is this another subject? I know.
Well, the befriending feelings, it has two pieces, and we'll talk, since we're on the parent topic, we'll talk about the parents first. Like, mm-hmm. when you're aware that you are anxious or excited, like, you can actually take a moment and check in with yourself and feel how mm-hmm. that actually feels in your body. So again, that anxious feeling, like we lean forward, we're like this, we might be clenching our fists, we might be muttering things to the person next to us. And that's not bad. It's just like noticing, oh, wow, look at all this energy that I'm bringing to this. And then you can say, like, okay, I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to let that feeling be there, but I'm not going to live it out and yell at my child or yell at the ref or yell at the coach. I'm just going to let that wave of feeling pass mm-hmm. and return my attention to the game, or decide that I can't return my attention to the game and I am going to get up and take a walk or go take pictures, or even just close my eyes and maybe just listen without watching for a minute, just to kind of reset.
Mm-hmm. And for the first thing, as you mentioned, is just knowing that you're doing this, right?
Right.
And so to get to that point, it's hearing conversations like this. It's knowing you have a problem, having, like, maybe your kid tell you, or, I mean, like, how do you get some of these parents to that first step?
Well, I think, first of all, anyone who's listening is already, they're thinking about it. So congratulations for that. And I think there's two things. Like, I think somewhere deep down inside, we actually know, but then there's also that part of us that says, well, I'm not that hockey dad, or, you know, whatever it is. And so the first thing is to really, like, at your next game or your next competition or even the next practice, like, go and bring your awareness with you and be curious, like, really, what am I thinking when I'm sitting in the bleachers? What are my thoughts? And you know, when, like, even if you're not saying anything, when you're thinking, go, pass it. Oh no, don't do that. Like, and it, like, just, and again, not beating ourselves up, not judging ourselves, but just like, who am I when I come to my child's competition? How do I behave? What does it feel like in my body? Like, can I watch with joy, and not get too excited or too deflated? Or am I like a big ball of nerves? And again, if you're a big ball of nerves, it's like, okay, I'm a big ball of nerves, and I'm going to make some space for that. I'm going to be kind about that. And then we come to the choosing my behavior. And I'm going to promise myself I'm not going to speak or act out of that space, because that's not helpful for my child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's steps. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
No, it's fine. The other thing is, in the book, there's a whole process for, like, if you want to do a more involved process, there's some written exercises about really exploring what are my thoughts and feelings about my child's participation in sport, and then the next couple pages you give to your child, and you get to ask your child what is their experience of your participation in their sport. And there's really interesting data, and I can send you the link for this, but there's a beautiful study out of Canada looking at junior elite tennis players, and they actually interview the tennis players in groups, and they clearly made it a very safe environment for these players to speak. And they talk about what is helpful for them in what their parents do and what is not so helpful. And what we need to keep, the bottom line of the whole study is that what we need to keep in mind as parents is so many of the things that we intend to be supportive feel like pressure to our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a structure in the book for sitting down and having a conversation. And really our job in this conversation as parents is to listen to our kids without defending, without explaining, without yes butting, without justifying, and just hear how it is for them. Like, and to ask them, like, what do I do that's supportive? What do I do that drives you absolutely nuts? What am I not doing that you'd like me to do? To be more supportive and less pressuring while you're training and competing.
I think that's such a great distinction, because we think we're being supportive, and it really comes out as pressure. And it takes a long time to figure out that difference, and to figure out that you might not be helping your athlete. I mean, it's a journey, right? I mean, what did you do with your son? And did you have all these tools, or daughter? I'm not sure, but
it's interesting. I was lucky to have a mindfulness practice before I had kids, so that was really helpful, but it doesn't mean I didn't, stumble and make mistakes and do or say things I wished I hadn't done along the way. But just noticing that feeling, like that sense of urgency, and I've been a crazy sports parent in moments. It took me a while to realize that my daughter was playing elite level soccer. It took me a while to hear that that wasn't her true passion. And, I think the biggest thing is listening, and listening without our own agendas.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard.
Yeah. It's hard to you got to always put your child first and their needs. And it is really difficult to separate the two, and easy to convince yourself that you're actually putting their needs first when you're not.
Right.
Let's talk about the kids a little bit. And I know that we were going to discuss different ways to help them in their performance as well. I'd really love to focus on this one aspect, because I hear from parents all the time, and I know my daughter just had a big tournament and was mentioning this too, that feeling of anxiousness right before. So this is where I think we're talking about befriending feelings also comes into this side of it. What does that feel like? Like, I would like for you to explain what a kid can recognize as anxiousness, and what thought they should bring to the top of their mind when they're feeling that.
Yeah. So how would you feel about doing a super short practice? Like me leading instead of like talking about it theoretically, me leading a super short practice.
I'm game. Yeah.
Okay. So the listeners can put themselves in that situation. That's, whatever it is, a big tournament, finals, maybe even, tryouts. And then if people are willing, they can close their eyes and anchor.
Close my eyes right now too?
Sure, we can both close our eyes.
Right.
And anchor your attention on the breath. And just take a moment to feel the belly expand with the in-breath and release with the out-breath. And then when you're ready, simply turn your kind attention to this moment that we're going to call anxiety. And bring that moment to mind with as much detail and clarity as possible. And now simply notice where that feeling lives in your body. So maybe it's a rapid heart rate or a tightness in your chest. Maybe it's a slight tension in your head or your jaw. Just noticing where the feeling shows up in the body. And then noticing how the feeling actually feels. Is it warm or cool? Is it smooth or jagged? Is it big or small? Is it moving or still? And then notice or imagine if the feeling has a color or colors. And if it doesn't have a color, that's fine. And then notice or imagine if the feeling has a sound. And then when you're ready, shift your attention back to your breath. And in your own time, take 3 slow, deep breaths and open your eyes when you're done. And so that practice is a way of befriending our feelings. We're not trying to get rid of them. We're not letting them take us over. So what I like to say is that people can practice having their feelings without their feelings having them. So often in sports or just in life, like the story is that anxiety is bad and we need to do something or change it or get rid of it. And it's like, really what we need to learn to do is to be able to let that feeling be there without it consuming us and without it, changing our performance for the worse. It's like, I can feel anxious. I have the ability to feel anxious and still perform at my best. Well, and that it's a skill that can be practiced over time. And just as a note, that practice and all the other practices that are in the book are recorded. So there's download audio that people can put on their phone and listen to in the locker room or on the bus or in the hotel lobby before they leave for a competition.
Well, I can tell you right away, because I really did go through it with you. And when I opened my eyes, I felt remarkably better because I wasn't imagining an anxiety. I didn't use a game situation, but just being live on camera. I was a producer. I'm always behind camera. It gives me a lot of anxiety. And it's interesting because I could really go through it in a legitimate, authentic way right there. And when you just realize, you recognize, I could feel exactly what you were talking about, that it had a certain, mine had a heaviness and a tingling and was silver for whatever reason. But I will say when I opened my eyes, I felt so much better. We should have done that right at the beginning.
Next time we'll start with the practice.
Yeah. And so I wanted to, can you tell that story too? I think this story that you told in the book really explains it well. You had the mom and daughter who were watching one of your discussions. Can you just tell that story really quickly?
Yeah, I gave an introductory evening on general mindfulness. It actually wasn't mindfulness for sports, for parents and children. And this mom came, I think actually with her 2 sons, and she raised, we were at the question and answer period, and she raised her hand and she said, like, she just started right in and she was already going really fast. And she said, I'm an anxious person and my kids are really anxious and I want to know what to do about it. And she kept going. And like, you could feel the whole room, you could just kind of feel the tension. And like, when she paused for a breath, I looked at her and I said, you do know it's okay to feel anxious. And like, you could feel her relax. You could see her kids physically relax. You could feel the whole room relax. And then we had this conversation because what was happening and what happens for her and for her kids, and then for the room. And what happens a lot is that we feel anxious about the tryout or about the competition, but then we start feeling anxious about feeling anxious. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't feel anxious. I'm not going to perform well. This is going to be terrible. And so then we're just layering anxiety on top of anxiety. But when you say it's okay to feel anxious, you can make space for that anxiety, you can befriend the anxiety the way we just did, then it's like, okay, it's just anxiety. Like, and this happens before every meet. And I know that I can meet it with kindness and that I can move forward. And so, I think there's this idea that we're going to do something magical where our anxiety is going to go away. And it's like, what I'm really talking about is having this skill of befriending our anxiety so that it's not in charge.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hello, anxiety. I see you're there. I can breathe into you. I know you have your natural time course, and I'm not going to fight it. I'm not going to give you a lot of energy. I'm just going to say a friendly hello and let you be there till it passes.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important, that little change of thought and perspective. And I hope people that are listening or watching this right now really get that. It's taking what is happening anyways, recognizing it, and just saying, okay, this is okay. I from all my mindful readings, and I've had George Mumford on, and I mean, my thing, I always tell the kids that when they talk about that, I'm like, yeah, that's totally fine. That is supposed to be happening. Like, you have to just embrace it. All it means, this is is the main thing I really say, is that it's important, right? If it wasn't important, you wouldn't feel that way. So just take that, and it's a real natural thing to feel for your body, to have the fear, the fight or flight, and to feel that way. It's just what we do with those feelings. And
right.
And it's
what story we make up about it. Like, we make up that anxiety is a problem, or that we have to get rid of it, or
you changed that woman and her daughter's life, no doubt, that day, by letting her see that from a different perspective. It's incredible and so important. Actually, mindfulness, from the time my kids were little, is one of the main things and agendas I have had to try to teach my kids. I feel, there's studies out there about how it affects, your entire life, your health, your depression, everything, every aspect of your world it touches and can have a positive influence on. The problem is, it's hard to convince kids, get them. It's just takes I keep hammering it. I keep talking about it. I don't know how much they do or don't. I think they probably do more than I even realize, because obviously a lot of it is just your internal dialogue, but it is such an important thing. And especially, and you work not just with athletes, but your history is with teens and with adults, and you said you even started with, what was it that the first?
Well, I've worked with kids from 3 to 93. So
yeah. A lot of serious issues that mindfulness can help, not just performing well in a game.
Right. So I think what you were asking is, I started teaching adults with chronic pain and chronic illness in the hospital. So I think that's what you were referring to.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, you can watch what happens with your thoughts and your feelings when I say this, but in the same way that we can get attached to our kids and their sports performance, we as parents, especially those of us who really think mindfulness is awesome, can get attached to our kids doing mindfulness. And so we need to be mindful of that too. And so one of the best things that we can do as parents is what I call mindfulness out loud, which means just saying for our kids what's happening for us. So saying like, honey, I got an upsetting email. I noticed that I have a lot of feelings. I'm going to take a moment to process this, or I'm going to go take a walk around the block or take a run. and I'll be back. And I don't mean to be snippy, and it's not about you. And I'm going to take some time and space for these feelings. And so we can do it in simple, subtle, honest, real ways. And then if our kids are open, like your daughter, like you can go through the whole book with them. And the catch is, like, if we want our kids to do it, then we should probably walk the talk.
Yeah, and lead by example, just that in so many things as parents. But it's really funny that you said that. My first, this is a really funny story. I shouldn't even admit it. But I had all three of my kids, they shared a room because they wanted to. This was years ago. And I said, tonight we're going to meditate. And I made this big thing about it. And I went in the room, and of course they're 5 or 6, 8, and 10. And it was a disaster. And I literally, towards the end of it, was like, just meditate. Like, it was, one was like, well, I'm thirsty. I don't really like the sound of this person's voice. I don't want this. I was forcing it hardcore. And it's a hysterical story, and I tell it all the time, but it was everything but mindful or meditative or relaxing. But,
right. And one way to do it is, like, you can also, because there is a reason that you wanted them to do it. And it is a valuable skill that helps in sports and in school and relationships and jobs and life in general. So, your intentions were really good. And one of the things you can do, or parents with younger kids can do now, is, make it a special time. So it's like, well, I'm going to go in the bedroom and I'm going to listen to this because it's really good for me. And if anyone wants to join me, you can. And they don't need to be still. They don't need to be super quiet. It would be nice if you could hear the audio track. And even if they're not lying in bed or sitting with their eyes closed, like the ideas are seeping in. Mm-hmm. And then it's more peaceful for you because you're not like, sit down and meditate. It's just like, this is good for me. I think it's good for you. You can join me if you want. And then, like, if it starts to feel special or like a privilege to do it. And then, they're more interested. And if they don't do it, but they see you doing it, just like if they see you going out for a run or eating healthy food, like, then it becomes more appealing.
Yeah. And it's somewhere in there. For my 48th birthday last year, I had, all I asked for was to go take my whole family to a meditation specialist. And we all did a little half-hour meditation, still forcing, but I think just hearing, as you're saying, just having them get used to hearing some of the terminology and seeing some of the results and going through it. It's got to be getting into their little fibers of them somehow. But we have one comment. Let me read this, and then we'll be wrapping up. It's from Kelly Wright. She says, I wish all parents could summon the self-awareness. We attended our daughter's first travel volleyball team tournament last weekend, and sitting next to some of the other parents was challenging at best. They were so loud and so overbearing that I became completely quiet so as not to add to the obnoxious feeling in the stands. Any thoughts on how to pass this on to other parents?
I think there's a few things. Sometimes it's okay to just say, and you have like, I have compassion for her because it's really hard to find the thing in the moment to say. And so sometimes it does take, like, going to that first game and processing it for yourself and stepping back and deciding what you want to say. But sometimes it can be as simple as, that may not be helpful, or I don't think they can hear the coach, or can you notice how your daughter's responding each time you yell? Like, often just one question, because questions invoke, if they're said without judgment, they do invoke kindness and curiosity. So it's like, can you notice the response when you yell like that, or something like that? And then if people want to go more in depth, someone, you might consider writing an email. And personally, when I'm writing an email for something that's loaded, I tend to let it sit for 2 or 3 days before I hit send. The more loaded the topic, the longer I wait to send it. And also then in the back of the book, is a set of agreements. There's an athlete agreement, a coach agreement, and a parent agreement written for teams about how teams choose to conduct themselves. And it's not, I don't think it's the be all and end all of agreements. I just think it's a really good jumping off point for teams, and to consider, like, that as a team, we agree to these following principles, and you can add or delete. But, probably not at the game, probably not in the parking lot. And maybe start by asking the coach, like, what is his or her preferred philosophy for parental conduct, and would he mind putting that out, or even giving him the agreements that I have and saying, look, I was sitting in the stands and I noticed it was stressful for me, so I can't imagine how it was for the girls. So do you want to address that? And sometimes coaches are so focused on coaching that they're not thinking about the other things that are impacting their athletes. And so we want to expand their awareness and have them create the most supportive environment for everybody.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice. And sharing stuff like this too, to hear Dr. Saltzman talk, Kelly, sharing it around to your club and to anyone who you think might get some value or benefit from it. The more we talk about it, the more people are aware of it. Dr. Amy Saltzman, thank you so much. That was a great discussion, and I hope everyone learned a lot. I know I did. And also, I wanted to mention that you do online courses. You have the book, and you're starting one up this Sunday. You can work with teams. You can do all different kinds of ways. You can work with athletes, teams, parents. And the book, again, A Still Quiet Place for Athletes. Like I said, my daughter and I read it together, and we just loved it. You can get it at astillquietplace.com. And I'm going to put that link up on Facebook, and I'll repost this with more information, including that link. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it.